On screen right now, this is an interview with Henry Tillman. Tillman was a cruiserweight and heavyweight contender from the 80s and early 90s. He was also an Olympic gold medalist. He fought Mike Tyson 3 times, twice as an amateur, once as a professional. And he also fought Evander Holyfield as a professional in a world title fight at cruiserweight. He won the first 2 fights against Mike Tyson, the amateur fights, and he lost the 3rd fight, which was a rematch in the pros, when he was knocked out by Tyson in 1 round. Now, Henry Tillman says that Bert Cooper, for those of you who don't know who Bert Cooper is, Bert Cooper was a journeyman, a heavyweight journeyman from the 80s and 90s, who also fought Holyfield, George Foreman, Riddick Bowe, many people, Ray Mercer. So Henry Tillman says that Bert Cooper, this journeyman, punched just as hard as Mike Tyson. And I've been telling people for a very, very long time that there are lots of fighters out there, journeymen, who hit just as hard, sometimes even harder, than the hardest punching world champions. And people can't seem to get their heads around this reality, but it's true. Now, Henry Tillman is not the only person to say that Bert Cooper hit at least as hard as Mike Tyson. Oliver McCall, who was Tyson's sparring partner for years, says that Bert Cooper hit him harder than anybody else he's ever been in the ring with. And when Bert Cooper hit him, it was in sparring, because Oliver McCall and Bert Cooper never fought in a professional ring. They only ever sparred together. And Oliver McCall said nobody hit him as hard as Bert Cooper did. He said it was a left hook. It was the hardest punch he's ever been hit with. Ray Mercer, who's the former WBO heavyweight champion and was known as one of the toughest heavyweights around at the time, having one of the best chins in boxing. He fought Lennox Lewis and Holyfield and many other people. Ray Mercer said that Bert Cooper hit him harder than Lennox Lewis did. Ray Mercer went 10 rounds with Lennox Lewis in an absolute war where he was going toe-to-toe with Lewis and taking Lewis's best shots. And Mercer says Bert Cooper hit harder than Lennox Lewis. I've got no reason to doubt what these men are saying about Bert Cooper's punching power, because I've heard it from so many different fighters over the years that Bert Cooper was right up there with the hardest punchers they've been in the ring with. But yet Bert Cooper was only a journeyman. Now, when he fought Tillman, Cooper wasn't a journeyman. Cooper was a cruiserweight contender. Their fight was a cruiserweight. And Cooper actually dropped Tillman in that fight. I think it was early in the fight. I can't remember exactly what round it was, but it was early in the fight where Cooper dropped Tillman. And Tillman got up, recovered, and won the fight on points, on a close points decision. So Cooper was known for his power. He also fought Michael Moorer, Bert Cooper, and he dropped Michael Moorer a few times in their fight. He famously dropped Evander Holyfield when he was brought in as a very late substitute to face Holyfield, because Holyfield was supposed to fight Tyson, but Tyson went to jail for the rape of Denzel Washington. Then they substituted Tyson with Francisco Damiani. He was supposed to come in and replace Tyson because, Tyson was sent to prison and Holyfield still had to fight on that date. But then Damiani pulled out, so at the very last minute, they brought in Bert Cooper. And this fight was in Atlanta, I believe. And yeah, Cooper was supposed to get blown out early, and he did get dropped by Holyfield, I think in the first round, was it? At the end of the first round with a body shot, Holyfield dropped him, I think, with a left hook to the body. But then Cooper got up and then came out in the next round and tagged Holyfield with a couple right hands. And Holyfield was in serious trouble. He was badly hurt. Now, bear in mind that Holyfield had been the distance with George Foreman, and George Foreman never even came close to putting Holyfield on the floor. Bert Cooper hurt Evander Holyfield way more than George Foreman did. In fact, he hurt Holyfield way more than anybody in Holyfield's career did, other than Riddick Bowe. But when Riddick Bowe hurt Evander Holyfield, it was in the 10th round of their first fight. So Holyfield was already tired and he'd already taken a lot of big punches from Bo. You know, so his punch resistance and his resistance in general had been worn down by that point. The same thing in the third Bo fight where Bo stopped Holyfield. Holyfield was tired, you know, very drained. His energy levels were depleted, and that's when Bo managed to knock him out. But Bo had been hitting him with all them same shots for, you know, several rounds previously, and Holyfield stood up to them. Whereas in the Bert Cooper fight, when Bert Cooper hurt Holyfield, Holyfield was completely fresh. He wasn't tired. He hadn't taken a lot of big punches, nothing like that. He was 100% fresh. But yet when Bert Cooper hurt him, he caught him with a clean right hand. He hurt Holyfield worse than Holyfield's ever been hurt before in his entire career, before or since, at least when he's been fresh. So that shows you the kind of punching power that Bert Cooper was dealing with, the kind of punching power he had. And again, people are going to say, well, how come Bert Cooper wasn't a world champion if he can punch so hard? If he can hit as hard as Tyson and harder than Lewis, how is it possible, first of all, because Bert Cooper's so small? And secondly, how come he wasn't a world champion? Well, I remember Monty Barrett saying the hardest puncher he ever stepped in the ring with wasn't Vladimir Klitschko, and it wasn't David Haye. He said the hardest puncher he ever stepped in the ring with was a guy called Eric Kirkland. Eric Kirkland was a little guy compared to those guys anyway. Eric Kirkland was maybe 210, 220 pounds, something like that. A small guy. I mean, same like Deontay Wilder today. He only weighs, you know, in the high teens to low 220s, and he hits as hard, if not harder, than many guys who weigh 250. So you do get some outliers, as Dwyer likes to call them. Certain guys who punch way, way above their weight. And in this instance, Bert Cooper was one of them guys. He just hit extremely hard. Even though he was a pretty small guy for a heavyweight. You know, when Bert Cooper was a heavyweight, I think when he fought Holyfield, he was maybe 215, 220, something like that when he fought Holyfield. So he was around the same kind of weight as Tyson as a heavyweight. But yeah, he hit just as hard as Tyson according to all accounts. But why did he not have all the success Tyson had? Because he didn't have the skill. Bert Cooper didn't have the greatest chin at heavyweight. You know, his chin wasn't terrible, but he didn't have the greatest chin. And he didn't always have the biggest heart for battle, and he certainly wasn't the most skilled fighter, Bert Cooper. He was easy to hit. He was relatively slow as well. Bert Cooper wasn't a fast guy. See, one of the things that made Tyson such a prolific puncher was the fact that he was fast. And when I mean prolific, I just mean that he's able to get a lot of KOs. All right? Bert Cooper may have hit just as hard as Tyson, but he wasn't able to get the KOs because he wasn't as prolific. He wasn't as consistent in terms of landing his big punches in fights, fight after fight. So Bert Cooper had the power, but he didn't have the skill or the ability to land the power as consistently as Tyson did. Hence why I call Tyson a prolific puncher, and I don't say Bert Cooper was a prolific puncher. Cooper wasn't a prolific puncher, certainly not at anything like world level. So yeah, this is the reality, man. Many fight, and you think it's just confined to Bert Cooper, then you're very naive. There are many fighters over the years, many heavyweights, even now, who hit harder than Mike Tyson. That's the facts. That's the reality. Many fighters hit harder than Tyson. With Tyson, I mean, I even remember Danny Williams, who did fight a past prime Tyson, but they say the last thing to go with a fighter is the power. And Danny Williams said, and by the way, Tyson said he was punching much harder after prison than he was before prison. Facts. You go look that up. Tyson said he was hitting much harder after he came out of jail than he was before jail. But anyway, Danny Williams said that Mark Potter hit him harder than Mike Tyson did. Mark Potter, who's a British level heavyweight, he hit him harder than Tyson did. This is the reality, people. Mike Tyson was as successful as he was, not just because of punching power, because a hell of a lot of heavyweights hit as hard as Tyson. Yeah, Tyson was a tremendous puncher, but there are a lot of tremendous punchers out there. Tyson was successful because of the speed, the technique, the skill, the accuracy, the ferocity. It was all these elements combined that made Mike Tyson what he was. Not just power. So to believe that there's nobody that could have punched as hard as Tyson, it's ridiculous. There are loads of heavyweights. And I've spoken about this guy before, but somebody like Darnell Boone, for example, who's a journeyman that campaigns between 154 to 168 pounds. Darnell Boone fought Sergey Kovalev, he fought Adonis Stevenson, he fought Andre Ward, among many others. And he dropped all three of those guys. He dropped Kovalev, had him seriously hurt. He dropped Stevenson and knocked him out. He dropped Andre Ward and had him seriously hurt. Nobody else that any three of those fighters have fought as professionals has even come close to hurting him as badly as Darnell Boone did. Facts. But yet Darnell Boone is much smaller than those guys. Darnell Boone is a journeyman. He's not a world level fighter. Because, listen, he's an outlier. Darnell Boone is a tremendous puncher. Even though his record, looking at KO percentage and all that, doesn't necessarily reflect that. When his punches connect on people's chins, it does reflect that. You understand what I'm telling you? The reaction of the opponents, of the top level opponents that he's fought and he's managed to connect on their chin, it reflects that. But he's not consistent in terms of being able to land those big punches against top level fighters because he don't have the skill. He don't have the ability. He's a small guy, takes fights on short notice and stuff like that. So his career has panned out not very well for him. He hasn't been very successful. He hasn't been a world champion or anything like that, you know? So, yeah, I just want to bring this home to people. The reality that the biggest punchers of all time are not necessarily guys you might have even heard of. They're not necessarily guys who are even world champions. Yeah. Because it takes a lot more than a big punch to be successful in boxing. You know, you need so many other elements. You need the delivery system. You might have that powerful bomb, but if you don't have a good delivery system, then the bomb is useless. And this is what you find with a lot of these journeyman fringe contenders who hit just as hard or harder than the top level world champions, but they don't have the delivery system necessary to land them big bombs consistently. You understand? So anyway, just my musings on big punches. Check out the interview with Henry Tillman. Let me know how you feel in the comment section, people. It's happening. I'm out.